This episode of Fermented Adventure the Podcast features Lyndon Smith of Botanist and Barrel. They create delicious, nuanced Southern natural cider and wine. Be sure to reach out to Lyndon and Botanist and Barrel and let them know what you thought about the podcast. Cheers! Hello, ladies and gentlemen, craft spirit enthusiasts, and those interested in the intoxicating world of craft distilleries, cideries, meaderies, wineries, and the occasional foray into breweries. It's Rich Shane, and welcome to Fermented Adventure, the podcast, where we bring you the fascinating people that are making the mash, fermenting, distilling, bottling, pouring, and delivering to you some of the finest libations in the world. Before we get started, here are a few housekeeping items. Thank you for bringing the podcast into wherever you are and whatever you're doing. We truly are grateful that you have chosen to listen and make us part of your day. It would mean the world to us if you left a 5-star review. This helps us climb in the rankings, and it makes it easier for others to find us. Don't hesitate to leave us your comments as well. If the podcast didn't meet your expectations, tell us why. We're always striving to improve. You can find us at fermentedadventure.com. We are on Instagram and Facebook as Fermented Adventure. Email us at fermentedadventure@gmail.com. All right, FA Nation, let's meet our guest. He's Lyndon Smith. I'm Rich Shane. This is Fermented Adventure, the podcast. Lyndon, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Well, I'm excited because we're going to talk cider, and we're going to talk, more importantly, Botanist and Barrel cider of Asheville, North Carolina. But where we want to get started and where we're going to go right from now is, how did that all get started for you?
Oh, it's quite an extensive backstory. So I'll try.
That's okay. We have 4 or 5 hours. The listener will it's like a Tim Ferriss extravaganza. We'll go for 8 hours like he does.
I'll try to keep it short and sweet. So myself and my wife, Amie Fields, both have really strong natural wine backgrounds. We were both either started or ran import and distribution companies in the southeastern United States for natural wine. And then my sister and brother-in-law, so that's Heather Smith and Derek McGuffey, were both formerly trained chefs and worked in some of the best kitchens in the southeastern United States as well. Taking it back 2 generations on both sides of our family. So on our mom's side, our dad's side, we had people making wine. So my grandfather's father was kind of involved in making the village wine in a little town called Brignol in southern France. And on my dad's side, my grandfather, Abe, kind of paid his way through medical school making bathtub tropical hooch, is the way my dad describes it. So we kind of come by it honestly. It skipped a generation. And then, all of us kind of have this love of local agriculture. Southern terroir is something that's, really important to us. And then we had this, food and beverage background. The perfect, beautiful storm happened. There was this kind of defunct blueberry farm that came for sale right outside of where, my sister and I grew up. Our folks bought a piece of it. About a year later, the other piece came for sale. We stepped in and bought that. We merged the whole farm back together. So it's 98 acres. Now we're growing blueberries, apples, a little bit of pear, some persimmon, some pawpaw, and then a lot of botanicals as well there that go into making Botanist and Barrel cider. And so this, perfect storm kind of happened. It happened to have a 10,000 square foot warehouse on it. And that's where we knew, we were going to do Botanist and Barrel and start making Southern natural cider and wine.
See, this is exactly why I've been excited to speak with you. When we were in Asheville, we must have been in your cidery, and I know you do wine there too. And you do amazing food. It's the only cidery that I've ever been to that has pate on the menu and some really cool things. But there's so much detail to your story. I mean, Amie was gracious. It was a wonderful time. And, for us, for Dawn and I, we thirst for more, to use kind of a pun with drinking cider. We thirst for more. We're very interested in, how things got to where they are. And it sounds like this has always been, or for such a long time, as you talked about, this is in your blood. This is in your veins. The soil, the earth, creating something and then taking it and producing something wonderful into a bottle, into a glass. As a child, you talked about, your recollection of some of the stories or, maybe some things you were consuming from the family. But what were some of the earlier childhood recollections for you to say, I really like this. This is good.
Yeah. So, one of the first photos I ever saw of myself, which is before I have any, actual memory, is there's this picture of me in a stroller reaching out and just grabbing flowers, like a handful of them. And so, my mom always jokes that it was just, there's no way that I wasn't going to be somehow involved in farming and local agriculture. But, as kids, Heather and I had this great life in the summers. And so our grandparents, when they came over from France, you can't buy land in France. It's not bought and sold. It's just passed down, generationally. My grandfather's one of 10. And so, they came over, he retired from, working at the World Bank, came to the US and immediately bought some very inexpensive land in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, in a place called Warren Center. And we would go up there every summer. There was this old kind of cottage, and we would, go up there for a couple of weeks at a time, and we would just forage. So we would make things like Chateau Green Acres, which was basically just, wild raspberries soaked with a little extra sugar and vodka. And we would, do this.
Wait, I'm writing that recipe cherries down. I want to make
it's
that.
It's very simple.
That is so cool.
It's so simple. And, so we would forage for fruits that would then just go into the pancakes for breakfast. And, these are some of my fondest memories as a child. And the same, goes for my sister, Heather. And so there's always just this love for just being out in the woods and collecting and gathering and then taking it home and making something, beautiful and delicious out of it.
So your first picture or recollection of your first picture is you grabbing flowers. My first recollection of some of the pictures I remember is my grandfather, Bill, and I guess they put me on a bar and sat me on a bar. So I there's that connection to what we're doing a little bit in a way. And I love the story. I love, as you grew up, the connection to the earth, the connection to agriculture. And I think it's so important. And I'm sure it's part of your education too, to help people understand all the hard work you're doing to what you're creating. So people understand there's so much more significance to that bottle. There's so much more significance than just, hey, it's a cider, it's a wine. And talk about some of those fruits that you're growing, that you're creating these micro ciders or micro wines that are more than what people expect.
Yeah. So this, we've got our own property. So we have what I call like a nano farm that's up in Leicester, North Carolina, that I just built in our backyard. So it's a couple acres. I think there's 800 trees up there now. It's blueberry, elderberry, some shiitake mushroom, and a decent amount of Basque variety of apple, and then Southern heirloom apples. And then on our farm in Cedar Grove, we've got some trellising. So we're growing mainly Southern heirloom apples there, some pear. We've got a 4-acre blueberry stand. And we're doing this all organic regenerative ag style. So we're not spraying any synthetics. We typically try to spray nothing ever. And we have many sites that are what I call never sprayed. So from day one, when the trees were planted, have never been sprayed. Over the past 3 seasons, we have been lucky enough to have some new relationships and new partners come on board, where we have been able to have long-term leases for some new properties, some new established orchards that we, did not plant, but have been around for 60 to 20 years already, that have never been sprayed. So at this point, we're now managing or co-managing around 12 acres of never sprayed apples. And I can't quite explain how challenging that is to do in the South. This climate that we have here, there are so much disease and insect pressure. We dealt with a huge battle with Japanese beetles in Cedar Grove this past summer. But there's so much disease and insect pressure. And, we do things in a completely different way. So there are very few organic orchards in the South, and that goes in vineyards for that matter as well, because it's just really, really challenging to do it. But when you grow in small pockets and you're not doing big ag, you can do it successfully. So we have sites that range from 4,000 plus feet elevation all the way near the Tennessee border of North Carolina, all the way down to just 500 feet, or even I think it's 200 feet elevation down in Cedar Grove. So we've got 12 of these sites now, and some of them have 40 trees, some of them have 400. So kind of in between that range. And what we're really proud about being able to do over the last 2 seasons is do these super site specific ciders. So we have an early, a mid, and a late season harvest from a specific orchard. And we're doing these all pet nat style. So for pet nat, it's short for pétillant naturel. It's the oldest way of having carbonation. So a lot of ciders and wines we've had are bottle conditioned or done in the champagne method, where you ferment something and then you add a new source of sugar and it re-ferments in the bottle to get carbonation. So to do pet nat, it's 0-0. Oh, there goes the dog.
That's okay. You say pet nat and the dog perks up and gets excited. I'm doing the same thing. I just don't bark.
For pet nats, it's 0-0. So it means nothing in, nothing out. And so we're not adding yeast at any point, and we're not adding any additional source of sugar at any point. So you have to capture it at the perfect moment in time to have just enough residual sugar that it can finish fermenting in the bottle and be naturally sparkling in that way. And I just love it so much because it's a true snapshot in time. Every season's different in every orchard. A lot of apple trees are biannual, meaning they only produce every other year. So the blends are going to be different. And depending on how many chill hours there were through winter, and depending on how humid or hot it was in any given growing season, you're going to have a totally different expression from each orchard, dependent upon each season and what that brought with it. And so when we do these pet nat ciders, even the yeast in the orchard, those cultures are going to change from season to season a little bit. And so you have these one-offs, like this is the only cider like that, period. And then the next year, it could be something, it'll be similar, but it could express in a totally different way. So we're really interested to see these, verticals through time, the 21 vintage versus the 22, and then the 23 from the same orchard, from the same season of picking. It's a really fascinating, it's the true convergence of art and science.
You've hit perfectly on the reason why when I try, let's say even your cider, I don't want to open up a bottle ever. It should be enjoyed. But once I open up and finish that bottle, that historical snapshot, the history of that time has been consumed. It's been enjoyed, but it's been consumed, and it may never come back again. And that's a very difficult thing when you open up and you savor. I'm listening to the story. I'm learning more about Epicurus. And with Epicurus, it was small little things, a little pot of cheese, right? That's where we get Epicurean from, the enjoyment of those little things, the food, the drink. And this is like that little, you open up a bottle and it's like, this is heaven. This is, the provenance. You talk about so many different things with your ciders, elevation here, elevation down here, yeast, climate changes. It's exciting for you when you do the harvest. I can only imagine to watch those flavors and those textures just develop and say, wow, overwhelming. This is more than we expected, or this is so interesting. And that's when we met at CiderCon. I was very fascinated by our brief conversation and, just learning more about what you do, because honestly, Lyndon, I think across the spectrum, you are very organically detailed. You are very detailed in, you're the farmer. you're growing these, and everybody has a different level of how they're going about the cider, how they're going about the wine. But you're getting your hands in there, as we talked about, and you're really cultivating that flavor that you want those grapes to shine with, or even the apples to shine with.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing goes for a perfect plate of food. You're only as good as the ingredients that you have. You can never elevate over the quality of food, and in this case, the fruit that you're working with. So, we just look at it as our jobs. We're really just stewards. We're just trying to grow the best fruit possible, and then treating it with as little intervention as possible once it gets into the winery, to just let, I saw this amazing bottle yesterday, and it said at the bottom, "Made by nature." And I was like, I don't think you can put it any better way than that. We're just here kind of as happy observers in so much of this.
I love your stewardship, your servant leadership to what you're doing. I don't want to wait anymore. We have 3 bottles here, and which one should we start with? Pardon the interruption. If you like what you hear, if you love what you're hearing, please share the podcast. Please take a screenshot of the podcast, post it on your social media, tag us, just to let everybody else know about Fermented Adventure, the podcast. We'd be grateful for your help to grow our podcast.
Let's start with that Traminette Pet Nat.
There we go. I picked the right bottle.
Yeah, we kind of look at this one as North Carolina's champagne, is kind of how we lovingly call it. So we focus a lot on non-traditional vinifera grapes. So we work a lot with hybrids or the native grape to the southeast, which is muscadine. In this case, this is Traminette. So this is a hybrid. It's very much in the space of Gewürztraminer. So you're going to catch a lot of those kind of, floral notes. And this was done as a pet nat. So this is just 100% adult juice. It's just grapes. There's no added anything. So this is done with ambient yeast. This is a open top fermentation, and then captured just so that it's carbonated inside of the bottle.
There's such a brightness to the nose on this. And you mentioned the Traminette, you mentioned muscadine, you mentioned this is in the Gewürztraminer style, or there's that kind of nuance to it in a way, right?
Yeah, this has a minerality. We aged it on its lees for a while, so it's got a creaminess kind of texture to it, in the mouthfeel. I haven't even gotten that far. We're just really pleased and excited about it. And, we've started planting a little bit of our own grapes, and, we're doing own rooted hybrids. So I'm big on own rooted, because when you think about, most grapes are grafted, right? And it's kind of like if you cut your finger off and then put it back on, it may work, but it's not going to work 100%. And so with own rooted, because of all that pressure in the South, both, for disease and insect, own rooted just gives it even that much more strength. So we're kind of focused on hybrids and own rooted grape for our wine program. And so we put all our wines under a separate label that's called Defy Wine. And we named it that intentionally because when we first set out, we were talking to a lot of people that make wine in the South, and they were like, there's no way you can make spontaneously fermented wine and not add sulfites and not use Valcarin and not use, a lot of the additions to make something guaranteed to be a clean and predictable fermentation. And so we kind of named it Defy as kind of like a little nod, like, no, we're going to try to defy the odds here and see what we can do. And, we're on our 4th vintage for grape wine. And we're getting better at it each year. And I'm, super happy with this Traminette in particular. I look forward to drinking it every time I have the opportunity.
I'm grateful that you're working so hard to keep the uniqueness, to keep what nature provided for this bottle. As you said, this is such a creamy mouthfeel. There's a minerality to it, as you described. There's a little bit of a bitterness that comes through. You get the sweetness of the grape. You get that texture of, you still know that there's apple in here, and you still get that brightness and that vibrancy to it. Almost, I love the marriage to what you're doing. This is delicious. This is something to be very proud of. And you said this is the 4th year and you're getting better. I can't wait to see what 5 looks like on this. To those that are like, I don't know about cider, I'm more of a wine drinker, I think you bring them together and you introduce them to a whole genre that for them, this is, I'm on to something now. This is something that's so tremendously delicious. And this goes with so many different things, some food pairings. I know that you guys just won an award, right?
Yeah. So one of the other bottles we'll taste. There's this amazing group organization. I don't know exactly how it identifies, but it's called the Good Food Awards. It's a guild. It's the Good Food Guild is what it is. So the Good Food Awards, it's really cool because a lot of the competitions one would enter as a brewer or winemaker. It's blind tasted and it's based on taste. Good Food is that. So it's got to be tasty, but they take it to a whole nother level. So they vet you for your environmental responsibility, and for making sure that you are a workplace for positive good. So you can't just be any cider or any wine to be in the running for a Good Food Award. You also have to, prove that you're growing in a responsible way, and that you aren't doing a lot of manipulation, and that you run a nice, good company with happy employees and kind of all of those other things. So it's taste plus. It's making sure that you're a responsible business from top to bottom. So it means something a little extra. We're very focused on, being an environmentally responsible company, and doing everything we can to make the cleanest product possible without any waste. I went to college for environmental studies, environmental economics in particular. And one of the things that I've always left with, probably the most valuable thing, was that if you're creating every waste you have from a business perspective, you paid to create said waste. So if you have waste products left behind, you need to just find a way to reduce that as absolutely as much as possible. So that's one of the lenses we're always looking at everything through, is how do we add and bring as few things into our winery as possible, and how do we make sure that we have as few things exit other than the intended consumable.
I love your perspective. I just love the way you come about how you want this for your business, Botanist and Barrel. I mean, you talked about Defy, but how did you come up with the name Botanist and Barrel?
We wanted, that took almost a year and a half for us to settle on a name.
That wasn't like, hey, I scribbled something on a napkin and it poof, it was there.
No, I think it was my wife. I know we were all sitting around having dinner, and it was towards, I think just like we were snacking on something and, drinking some cider. And, we had we wanted to have something that involved botanical, because we wanted our name to reflect this idea of terroir, and in our case, particularly Southern terroir. And it just, that marriage it just popped out of her mouth like Botanist and Barrel. And we were like, that's it, that's the one. But it took a while for the brainstorming to develop, to come up with that name. But I think it does represent what we do. And, we run one of the most ridiculous barrel programs, I would say, in the country. I mean, the experimental nature of our barrel program is kind of ridiculous. Everything from some of them haven't worked out, like vanilla extract barrel, we've never actually put that into a bottle. But everything from tequila to sea salt to Sauternes, that's kind of our go-to, and everything in between, from bourbon and whiskey and gin, like Fernet barrels. Those are really hard to come by, but we have this beautiful cider that's aged in Fernet barrel. So we'll pretty much try anything at least once, learn from it, and then we'll keep using those barrels if we love it.
That Fernet barrel is your partnership with Cidery, right?
Yeah, so we're good friends with the folks from Cidery, and they make some of the most amazing foraged ingredient spirits I've ever had in the world. So Fernet, Amaro, and Nocino, and I'm really sad because I'm not going to get any Fernet barrels for a while. So that cider, however many cases we have left, which is just a few, that's going to be it for a few years probably. But yeah, barrels like that are just so rare and hard to come by, and they create such a beautiful nuanced cider. One of the things with barrels is we don't ever use new oak. We're always using something that's been filled with something else before. Because cider's like high elevation white wine, it's delicate, and so if you're using new oak, it kind of overpowers and hides apple and cider. It hides all the nuance and flavors that we really want to express. So we're always kind of using freshly dumped other barrels is our program, and nothing ever new.
You use the word nuance, and I think I'm going to take that from you because I don't use that enough, but I think that's such a valuable word, especially to describe the cider that we've had prior and the cider we're having now. There's nuance. Even in this small pour that I did, I get honeysuckle, I get honey, I get citrus notes, orange flavor, almost like an orange blossom that kind of becomes this oily citrus. You get some spices, but not the baking spices that maybe you'd find or think about in a typical Gewürztraminer, as you talked about, but more of those there's more nuanced Indian spices. There's a little bit of stuff hiding there in the background. And as you sip through this, as I'm picturing maybe hanging out on that farm you have, and looking out on all the things that are going on and just enjoying this. For you and Amie, that must be such a wonderful experience when you open up one of these bottles and either it's just the two of you or some family or friends, and just living that to where it's just, you sigh and say, today was a good day.
For sure. I call it the maker's curse. And so it's a really interesting thing, because when we drink our own, so when we're drinking a bottle of Defy or a bottle of Botanist and Barrel, it's 1 in 100 where I'm able to not be critical. And I just am able to strip it all away and just be in the moment and enjoy it. If I'm drinking other people's stuff, it's very easy for me to do that and not be hypercritical, but it's the maker's curse. When you're drinking your own, you're always wondering if you could have done one more little thing to have made it sing even that one note little more. But I'm learning. I'm working really hard. It's like an interpersonal issue to just be more present and just enjoy it for that snapshot that it is. And I do that, but we're just kind of like hypercritical on ourselves. I think every painter and every chef never would present something and say, this is absolute perfection. It could be so close, but there's always that one little striving for reaching for just a little bit more. But I think that's also what drives us to keep going. Farming is some of the hardest work that one can do to their body. And so you gotta be in this game for the love of it. This is not it's a lifestyle choice, I would say, as opposed to a business choice. because I'm sure everybody in this game would tell you you could make a lot more money doing many other things. But we're here because, we truly love, we're chasing perfection.
Look, you want to keep the lights on, you want to keep gas in the tractors and the equipment, but the payment monetarily is what keeps that going. But the payment for a job well done will never exceed the financial payment that you receive. And I'm sure you sound very humble. And I think that comes from just your background and your family and growing up. But I'm sure there are times when you take that sip or work through a bottle and go, I'm really good at what I do. And I'm sure that's there, because if it's not, you don't grow from that point to say, how do I make this better? And that's me bragging on you. That's me saying, if you're not willing to see that or say that, you can ask Dawn. I grew up in kitchens. I'm a chef as well. And there are times when I'll sit down and I'll make something and I go, I'm good at this. This is okay. And it's not me being braggadocious. It's saying this, I can do this. I have this skill. I have this talent. And these ciders and what we've had today and prior, you guys are really good at this. You're tremendously good at this.
Well, we appreciate those kind words. And we are confident in what we do. Like I touched on it earlier. It's having the best apples and grapes that we can possibly source locally and grow locally on our own farms, or on our partners' farms. And it really just comes down, to that. And we know we have some of the best fruit in the South. We're very confident in that. And we're very confident in our low intervention practices in the winery as well. And, winemaking is, this is a lifelong learning curve, to say the least. And so, because it's such a long process, a short cider, from us is 9 months from, pressing to it being released in a bottle, and even longer for wines and for some ciders. And so, your learning curve is so long, because something you've done in an orchard or a vineyard 3 years ago is now coming to fruition, pun intended, not intended. and then you see it, then you do whatever you're doing in the winery, and that's another year. And then, you have to find these cause and effect, but this is a really long process. So it takes a lot of time and a lot of practice. And, we're still coming at it.
We get to enjoy the fruits of your labor, and that is a pun intended.
Yeah.
Which bottle should we go to next?
Let's go and do the Not What We May Be. This is the one that is the Good Food Award finalist for 2023. We had another single orchard cider be a finalist for 2022, which comes from the Farmer's Orchard, which is in Candler, North Carolina. And so this is a late season blend that's just from Morris Orchard, which is in Amherst County, Virginia. And we look at this like high elevation white wine. So this is 100% heirloom apples. So it's Ashmead's Kernel, it's Palm Gris, it's Harrison, and it's Golden Russet. And so you've got apples with aromatics, you've got apples with tannin, you've got apples with lots of nuance, really good acidity. It's got everything going on for it. And so we called it Not What We May Be. I love the story behind this name. So this is Ophelia in Shakespeare's Hamlet. And so she has, this very famous quote, "We know where we are, but not what we may be." And when I was reading this, and I related to it so deeply with making pet nat cider, because you don't know exactly, the apples that you harvested, we can get the chemistry on them. We know the pH and the total acidity. We know the sugar content. We know what those apples are known for doing aromatically. But when you go through the fermentation process with ambient yeast, you don't always know what's going to happen. And so that quote just meant, it just really touched on that. So, we know where we are, we know what the apples we've been working with this orchard for 6 years. We generally know what that yeast, how it's going to perform and what it's going to do. But yet every time we do it, it's just a little bit different. And so we know where we are, but not what we may be. And so we love this cider so much. This is one of my favorite ciders we've ever made. It's just beautiful on so many levels. And so we kind of, that title just kind of means a lot, I think, to a natural cider maker in particular.
This is so important to the connection now to what's in the bottle, the story, the history behind it, the varietals of apples that you're using. And I think where you are in North Carolina, where you are in the industry, the next level is, and you're helping to perpetuate this, the next level is, I don't want to just go into the cidery or a bar that has cider and say, I'll take a cider. What people may do is say, I will have, or I'd like to have a cider with this varietal or this blend of apples. And I think for the future of cider makers and apple growers, I'm hoping that this is now what gets elevated, that we become so interested, as somebody might say, I'll have a Chardonnay, I will have a Pinot Grigio, or some sort of a blend that we're familiar with as a wine grower and a wine producer, that's that next level. So that when you grab this bottle from Botanist and Barrel, that those apples and you're gravitating to that flavor profile that you're looking forward to. I haven't tasted this. I haven't put this, I haven't sipped this. First thing I get when I open this up is this yeast explosion. And then that brightness, the acidity, the vibrancy of those apples just take over. And there's a ribbon of just, it's almost like that orchestra conductor. There's this different apple that just kind of finds its way into the nose. It's just so wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to hear you, raise the point about taking cider and looking at it through the lens that most wine consumers would look at it through. Right now on the federal level, the agency that regulates cider and wine, we're not allowed to put vintage on a bottle of cider, which is a really odd thing to prevent someone from doing, just because it's made from apples as opposed to grapes. There are no AVAs, so that, there are no agricultural regions for cider. So, on a national and local level, there's a lot of people, myself included, working pretty diligently to remedy those, because it does put cider at a disadvantage, in relation to what else is going on, because it's limiting the information that we can convey to consumers. Because for cider, we should be talking about terroir, we should be talking about apple varieties, we should be talking about vintage, because all of those things are really important to letting potential consumers know what to expect, what's in the bottle, how it was grown, where it's come from, all of those, those things that we kind of, I would say, almost take for granted when we are selecting a bottle of wine, from a bottle shop, because it's just given that all that information is going to be provided. So yeah, it's something that I would love to see remedied. And, we're doing everything we can to share that information with cider fans within the parameters that we're allowed to.
I think it's coming. I think it's like anything else.
I hope so.
You're educating, we're raising the expectation. Once you get that level of knowledge, you thirst for more, if this is something you're interested in. And over time, to you and to the point, look, cider goes back to pre-colonial. Cider was the almost original consumed beverage, because you couldn't drink the water. You had to have something available.
The beverage. It was the thing that
right.
that we were all drinking,
Right.
For sure.
So, we come back to where we are today, and this is as that, hey, I'm more interested, and people talk about it. We're still in its infancy for the cider industry, but we're not, but those additional things will start to happen. And it's through the hard work that you're doing and helping people change perspective and in some cases laws.
Yeah, I mean, any policy change is quite a process. So we know it's going to take some time, but the work it's happening, it's underway, and I know we'll get there. Right now it's crazy to think about it. Cider was the beverage that people drank for all the reasons you just pointed out, and then today in the United States in particular, it's 1% of adult beverage that's consumed is cider. And it is growing. It's one of the faster growing categories, but it's got a long way. It's got a long way to go. I think cider had a bad reputation, 20 years ago for just being this cloyingly, drippingly sweet beverage that was maybe not well made or something, very mass produced kind of product. And now, there's over 1,000 cideries in the United States. Overwhelming majority of them make under 5,000 gallons a year. So we're talking about, true family, small run, independent, kind of small companies, mom and pops that are, really focused on their specific region, apples from, wherever they're located. And, you're seeing this kind of resurgence of, the pendulum swings through time. We're moving away from the McDonaldization of things, and I think going back to a more focus on local, where you would go to a farmer's market and pick up your groceries as opposed to a box grocery store, and I think the cider movement is definitely a big part of that.
I think that's interesting. As you point that out, it almost, as you're describing it, I almost am reminded to slow down, to be in the moment. And what you explained 20 years ago is not that enjoy this moment. It's not about, oh, yeah, I'll have a cider and I know what that sweet stuff. I'm going to have this complex, to use your word, nuanced, enjoyable beverage. And this right here, the first thing I get is like a cinnamon note. You get the skins that come out on this. There's this brightness. There's this acidity. And, talk to, I asked this and maybe it's just me wanting to learn more, but there's a bitterness that kind of lingers, that, the dryness that makes you just want to keep drinking more. I'll sip, I'll pour, I'll drink, what is that?
Yeah, it's tannin.
Yeah. So
so we work really hard to try to, when you do spontaneous, wild fermentation, we don't have a mechanism to stop fermentation and leave sugar behind. So pretty much there are exceptions, but pretty much all of our ciders and wines are going to be truly bone dry. So not 2 grams of residual sugar bone dry, but 0.1 or 0 dry. Sugar is part of the human experience of the perfect sip or the perfect bite, having all those things, salt, crunch, all umami. Sugar is part of that, right? So that's why we have such an extensive barrel program, because barrels can kind of trick your palate in a sense, that there is sugar that isn't there. And so can co-fermentation with fruit. So we make cider in a very different way. Like most cider is you make a base cider, and then at the end you add fruit flavor into it. And pretty much for everything we do, it's, if we're making a strawberry cider or, some iteration of that, it's strawberries and apple from day one in the tank together, co-fermenting together. So, we're talking about nuance. The reason we do that is for nuance. We want strawberries to taste like fresh strawberry. When you back in strawberry at the end, it tastes like stewed or cooked strawberry. And then it's just literally a strawberry beverage with cider as the base. We want it to be a strawberry cider so that it's bright, fresh strawberry, but you still know it's a cider. So it's not like punchy with the flavor, but, and you get that with co-fermentation. So we do so much co-fermentation, it's not even funny. We've made 500 plus ciders since we've opened. So we usually, release something like 100 a year. And all these different plays, we're using all these kind of like wacky ingredients, everything from beauty berry to pawpaws, persimmons, blackberry, raspberry, blueberry, and everything is local. Everything's hyper local with a few exceptions. We've done things with pineapple and stuff like that, which obviously you can't grow in North Carolina. But we do get citrus from Northern Georgia. We're as focused on making sure things are local as absolutely possible. But that is how, we try to achieve that nuance, is to do co-fermentation.
You mentioned, pawpaw and persimmon, and I look at these in my mind as in the new world that we are. I think these are other things, like some of these varietals of apples that have just disappeared or maybe have been saved by a small, orchard provider. But pawpaw, persimmon, these are heirloom varietal fruits that I would consider that. Maybe I'm mischaracterizing that. But those are things I think you're bringing back from the history of what we had in this country in the beginning. What are some of the things you're doing with what I would characterize as an heirloom varietal? What are you doing with those fruits?
So, with pawpaw and persimmon both, we're fortunate enough to have the only pawpaw orchard. There's a few more coming on board, but that has been established in the South. It's really sad when recently passed. But he has this, beautiful pawpaw orchard, and the fruit was only going to 3 different people, and we were lucky enough to be one of those people. And so, we harvest them, we wait for them to fall on the ground, we process them in house. So we use an Italian tomato strainer to remove the peel and the seeds. We freeze the puree, and then we add that puree in with cider that's pressed really similarly time in the season. What grows together goes together kind of mentality. And then we've played around. So we make just a straight pawpaw cider co-ferment. And then, we're very playful and experimental. And so someone had, I don't even remember how or when, had the idea of adding a little bit of jasmine tea. And so we experimented with that. It's become one of our most popular and favorite ciders. It expresses a lot like passion fruit. So it takes the tropicalness of pawpaw and then pushes it into an even more outrageous tropical expression in cider. And then pawpaw is pretty present. You definitely, that flavor really comes through even with co-fermentation. Persimmon's much more, it's a much more softer, muted flavor once it goes through fermentation. So we tend to treat that in a barrel. So what our favorite expression of that is persimmon co-ferment that's then aged in local gin barrel. And it gives it that little kind of like piney juniper pop. But you still have that really nice subtle undertone of persimmon. And so we're doing them in different quantities. Like sometimes it's 1 pound per gallon ratio, and other times it might be 6 pounds, kind of just depending on, what the fruit's telling us it needs to show itself.
See, I knew this was going to be fascinating. And I knew like going in this, but you talk about this new thing and the next thing and the next thing. And for me, it's like, all right, I want that bottle and I want that bottle. I'm almost going to have.
We're doing our job then. We're doing a great job.
Asheville is way too far away from where we are, just outside of Philadelphia. So we need to open up, a satellite Botanist and Barrel here in the area, because I think that, we talk about that. How do you ship nationally? How can people find? I'm sure there are limited releases that you have just in your tasting room or your area. How do people find and get a hold of these great bottles?
Yeah, so we do ship to 39 states across the U.S. You can also find us in local bottle shops in 7 states, just through distribution in the U.S. And so if you go to our website, we also have, there'll be a ship to your door button that'll be there. And that's just at botanistandbarrel.com. And then we also have a couple of different clubs. So we have a wine club that's for the Defy wines. We have a 3 bottle for Botanist and Barrel. These are quarterly shipments. We have a 6 bottle for Botanist and Barrel. And then we have my favorite, which is called Anything Goes. So it's where we are including some of the more interesting co-fermentations, or we're doing piquettes or a lot of like wine cider hybrids. So we're at maybe a really strong blend with a lot of Mourvedre and cider or something like that. So anything goes is just like the really fun, playful one. But yeah, it's pretty easy to get stuff dropped off at your door.
And you're on the social medias at Botanist and Barrel?
Yeah, it's just at Botanist and Barrel. And then, so, we have 2 locations. So in Cedar Grove, that's where our winery and farm exists. And we've got a all outdoor venue there. We have a wood-fired pizza oven. We do tons of pop-ups. We're really excited. We've got Mission Pizza, which is a James Beard nominated chef, coming to do a pizza pop-up there, using our oven. We do a bunch of festivals there, and a bunch of fundraising kind of festivals. It's like all tied in together. And then we have Botanist and Barrel-Asheville. And so the social media tags for that are Botanist and Barrel-Asheville. And that's kind of a much more fine-tuned experience. In Cedar Grove, it's all outdoors. So it's picnic tables. It's a little more seasonal. We're open in winter. We actually have those cool greenhouse domes that you can rent.
Cool.
But we don't do music or have food trucks or do, food. We kind of December through February, we shut all that down. But then come March, it all fires back up. So we do music residencies there. And then Asheville, it's much more polished, like epic charcuterie and cheese boards. We have one of the biggest selections of tinned seafood you'll ever find.
That's right. The sardines and
oh man,
I've
gone crazy.
My mouth is like, we had just eaten lunch, and I'm like, wow, we could have done this. This was, who thinks of this? You guys are just so creative.
It's what we love. It's really just a reflection of what we're really fascinated with. Both Amie and I are huge tinned seafood fans, from traveling overseas. You kind of fall in love with this stuff and you realize how amazing some of it can be. So we're actually getting ready to launch a tinned seafood club out of the Asheville location, because
awesome.
We've got so many people that are getting really excited about it. So I think we've got like 70 different tinned seafood, can service in there now. And it's just really, really fun and beautiful. And then, Asheville, we're doing music every Friday night now and doing more, we've got Chef Jay Chong, who is just on The Big Brunch on HBO, doing a series of pop-up dinners. So we're just trying to have fun and, show, cider is the most, one of the most pairable beverages on earth. It kind of almost goes with everything. So just trying to show how beautiful cider can be and put it in all these different, positions. Like you can drink cider with music. You can drink cider with, almost any meal that you're having. And just, but also not being pretentious, just, letting cider be the humble, beautiful thing that it is and just having fun.
Well, you said having fun. We loved our first time in Asheville. And to that point, I know that people go there looking for the beer scene, and it's an amazing beer scene. But you're going to come across this one particular cidery that I can speak to, Botanist and Barrel, that this should be a pin on the map to say, don't leave Asheville if you haven't stopped here. And the winery that you have out in Cedarville, right?
Cedar Grove. Yeah.
Cedar Grove.
It's near Durham. It's near Durham, North Carolina.
All
so right there.
I've already gotten a go bag packed for when we go back. We'll definitely be back. And this whole idea, this pizza thing and some of the festivals, we'll keep tabs on that. But it's exciting. What you're doing is exciting. We have this one more bottle here to talk about and enjoy. Which is this one?
Okay, so the last one here, this is Pink as a Feeling. And so the native grape to the southeastern U.S. is muscadine. So there's lots of different individual varieties of muscadine. There's Carlos, Magnolia, Noble, it could go on and on. Pink as a Feeling is cider that's re-fermented on muscadine skins. So muscadine has this really bad reputation for being super sweet and not being something that, a lot of people are like, oh, no, I don't want anything that involves muscadine. Like you just hear it all the time. So we've kind of, at Botanist and Barrel, we've kind of set out to reclaim muscadine and show it in a new light. So we're doing bone dry, wild fermentation expressions of muscadine. This is one of the first ones we did. And when you re-ferment on muscadine grape skins, it kind of glows when it's really young. It glows neon pink. As it ages, the color deepens a little bit and gets a little darker and less neon glowy. So I came across this beautiful quote from D'Angelo Williams, who was a football player that played for the Carolina Panthers back in the day. And it was, pink isn't a color to me, it's a culture. And so, his mother had a bunch of bouts with breast cancer.
He also played for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So,
okay. Yeah. I mean, I knew he moved on at some point.
Yeah. I mean, that's really where his notable career is. I mean,
oh, okay. So we borrowed from him with this quote, about pink is a feeling. And then, we tied that in. So, we donate the proceeds of this bottle for breast cancer research. Because we've had some folks in our family.
Love the color. I love
this. It's beautiful.
I love the color. It reminds me of pomegranate juice. And I think a lot of times when you open or enjoy something, whether it's wine or rosé, you're expecting this light tinted pinkish hue. And I love the deep, vibrant pink here, but it reminds me of pomegranate. So my mind is already thinking in pomegranate. And I'm sure it's not going to be that.
No, it's going to taste like muscadine. And, a lot of people ask, well, what does muscadine taste like? And I just respond, muscadine tastes like muscadine. There's really it's not one of those things where you can say, oh, well, it's got this spice or this thing. Muscadine is its own universe. It just is muscadine. And I think it's one of the most beautiful fruits. I love just eating them, fresh off the vine. And I love them fermented. We serve this amazing sandwich at Asheville Bar we call it the Carolina. It's Carolina ham from Lady Edison, some of the best ham, made in the country, if not the world. It's muscadine jelly, but bread, like local baguette, and butter. It's just so simple, 4-ingredient sandwich. And we pair it with pink is the feeling. And then we have another version. It's called Grapes Have Feelings, which is the juice and cider that are both barrel fermented and then blended. And then we have a new one that's called Muscadine State of Mind. That might be my favorite of all time. That's a muscadine paquette, but it also includes the juice. So we haven't removed the juice. So it's like a muscadine spritzer. And it's just absolutely beautiful. It's one of my favorite things on earth right now. And it is one of those things where I don't think I could do Muscadine State of Mind better. It's beautiful, organically grown grapes from our buddy TY. And it just makes me happy just talking about it. I have a huge sense of pride. And it just makes me happy every time I get to drink it.
My first experience, we had this in a little taste in the cidery, but I think sometimes after you had a number of different things, it plays. And I haven't had, my senses are still here, I believe, where they're not dulled by tasting too many things. So I think I'm having, this is wonderful where I'm having even, and I'm sure if this is a freshly opened bottle, you might have a different experience in something that may have been sitting there just a little bit longer that had been open. There's a vanilla, there's like this oily vanilla note to this. It's almost as if, and then sometimes you'll have a wine where you wonder where all that residual sugar came from because that's not what the grape would taste like when it was picked off the vine. And this bottle represents what, if never having had a muscadine, if I picked one of those and I put this in my mouth, I feel like this would be that experience in a way, but now you've treated that fruit so respectfully to take out so much of the character of it that this is what comes into the glass. I get a smokiness to this, an earthiness to this,
for sure,
that I'm really enjoying. This. Thank you for bringing this into our lives, in our world, and creating something that's so wonderful.
Yeah, I get so excited for the first time I taste muscadine with folks. And this, if you grew up in the South, there's muscadine juice that you can get at the convenience store. So it's very, it's very present and around, but, once you get a little bit more north or west, it's just, people are like, what is a muscadine? We brought Muscadine State of Mind to a couple of festivals this past winter that were up north. And I just love watching people taste it for the first time and trying to figure out what on earth it is. And if this is what it's supposed to be like, and all this, a lot of times in the wine world, the word foxy is looked at as a flaw. I don't look at it like that, that way. But a lot of people describe it as foxy. And I think it's a great way of describing it. Because, foxy is kind of, it's a way of presenting yourself, not necessarily a set flavor profile, if that makes any sense.
It makes sense. And as you describe that foxy experience, look, I like something that's new and different or interesting that I've never had before, because it awakens my senses to just a whole new experience. And I think that I always wonder, where do you think, or where do you believe if somebody were to say Botanist and Barrel, the mission statement is, I think, very clean and wholesome. And you talked about the provenance and the terroir. But what would you say are the characteristics, that consistent thread that says, I expect this from a Botanist and Barrel product or a Defy wine product?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, you're going to get local agriculture. You're going to get no additives. You're going to get creativity, and you're going to get something that will pair with any meal you're going to have. And then, we make so many different things, it's hard to box us in. So, we always have this idea, let's expect the unexpected. So I hope that's kind of the sense, that people get from us. Is that every time you visit Botanist and Barrel, you're going to find something new. And we don't expect, we serve a lot of flights, and we don't expect everyone to love every single thing in the flight. It would be near impossible. It happens, and we love all of them. But at the same time, we're making so many different things that I don't expect everyone to love everything. And we're totally okay with that. And we embrace that. We want you to come find something that, where you absolutely fall in love for the first time. The other thing I hope that people get a sense of from us is this, we truly believe in Southern hospitality. And so we really want to engage. And if, people want to, geek out and, talk and, nerd out on all the science and the specifics of all this stuff, we want to have those conversations with you. If you just want to talk about the best meal you've ever had, we want to talk about that with you. We want you to be so comfortable, like you just feel like you're, hanging out with a long lost cousin in the backyard at a barbecue. We want everyone to feel welcome. There's this hashtag ciders for everyone. I change that and I kind of think, natural cider, natural wine. This is the liquid of the people. This is stripped down. It is exactly what it is. And just like all of us, we're all kind of perfectly imperfect. So I hope that those are the things that, we represent and convey to folks.
Loud and clear, man. You conveyed that perfectly. This has been this has been a treat for me. This has been, I'm grateful to your family's heritage, to what they've done to bring you and I together to this very moment, and to what you get to share and bring to the world. This is so wonderful. I know you're working hard to change North Carolina legislation and, the natural wines and ciders and the perception of the world, the country, all those things. Is there anything we haven't talked about on the podcast today that you want people to know about what you're doing, or anything that you want our listeners to know about?
No, I would just, the only things I would close out with is, COVID changed things a lot for a lot of businesses. We kind of took a step back from doing a lot of collaborations. We got a little insular, I think that's understandable, but we're really excited. We're bringing back a lot of collaborations and building some new partnerships this year. And so, what I'm really excited about this year is we're doing, we sent some muscadines up north to Artifact Cider. So we've got a little collaboration going on with them. We've got an upcoming project with Enlightenment Wines and Meads out of Brooklyn. So we're doing a mead cider blend that we conditioned with a little bit of raspberry and muscadine juice, which I'm super excited about. Really interesting wine, mead, cider hybrid going on there. We're also doing something with our friends from Graft, which is really exciting because, both of us, along with Artifact, we're making natural cider. And, we're all kind of like carrying the torches in our local regions for making natural cider. And then we're also doing something with some folks called Crooked Run in Virginia that started out making beer and then now have launched a really cool natural cider and wine program. So we're kind of doing some cider collaborations that you don't always see happen. But we're really excited about, doing these cross terroir, projects with folks.
Look, you're excited. I'm excited. I'm the consumer. I get to enjoy all the hard work that you're doing. And Brooklyn isn't too far from where we are. So we'll definitely keep that on our radar to make sure we try to get up and try to enjoy that. Mm-hmm. Lyndon, thank you so much to you and Amie and your family and, everybody you have working with you. We're grateful that you are, part of our Fermented Adventure family. And like I said, I've got that to-go bag pack, and I can't wait to get down back to your area. And Dawn and I decided, we need to get down there at least once a year for sure and enjoy the, everything that everybody's doing down there. And come down, the trunk was sagging, the car was sagging on the way back with all the bottles. But I missed that Fernet bottle that you guys had, but hopefully there'll be one in stock at some point. And this club, this cider club that you have, people should, go to the website, check that out, sign up and get some of these bottles that you're going to find that are going to, hit your doorstep, that you're not going to get anything like this cider or the wines that you're producing, the fruits that you're creating. This is awesome. So Lyndon, thank you so much for your time today. And we had a blast. Thank you.
Yeah, Rich, thanks for having me on, and thanks for sharing everybody's stories. This is awesome.
Cheers.
Cheers.